Thank you. So yeah, my name is Jeremy Rohr. We live in St. Michael, go to St. Michael's Parish. And as we start the year as trainers, as facilitators, I have a question for you to ponder. What does God want to write in your Cana story this year? I think that's a good question to ask as we start the year. What does God have for us? What I want to do is just to give you an idea of what could happen in the goodness of God. Just to give you an idea of maybe what God has in store, I want to share with you our Cana story. And it's interesting. This is actually a picture of Cindy and I on Sunday. We dropped off our oldest daughter, Lindsay, in the black jacket there in the glass. Well, I guess most of us have glasses out there. We dropped our oldest daughter, Lindsay, off in New Ulm at the mother house of the Handmaids of the Heart of Jesus. And yesterday we got this photo. She's top left there. I don't know if I've ever seen a young woman so happy as she is to finally be there after a few years. And, it's interesting. I think as this day came and Lindsay was getting ready to go, so many people had come up to Cindy and I, and they'd say, wow, this is so great. As if it's something that we did. As if it's something that we did. And the reality is, all we did was say a bunch of yeses that facilitated a young woman at age 24 that's willing to go and discern whether or not she will give her life to be a bride of Christ. And that relates to what you are all here for. Is you're partway through, you're at some point in your Cana story. This was Cindy and I 23 years ago. This was about the time that Cindy got an invitation to participate in the ministry that was the predecessor of Cana. Our daughters were Lindsay in the white was 3, Laura was 2 when that invitation came. And of course, like many of the men, right, the invitation also came to me then to join a Cana small group. And we said yes. We were so excited. We loved our faith. We were excited to live it out. We were like, yeah, what do we have to lose? Now, in addition to that, Cindy also accepted the invitation to become a facilitator, a small group facilitator. And it's interesting how her little yeses along the way brought us to this moment and have created what as I got back Sunday night, as emotional as the day was and the mixture of emotions, by the time I went to bed, I had just a huge gratitude for what God has given us the privilege to do as parents. And so, as I said, Cindy accepted the invitation to become a facilitator. And that gave her the opportunity to travel once a month with a woman by the name of Kate, from Rogers down to Wayzata, where they did training at the time. And Cindy and Kate hit it off. They were like 2 peas in a pot, and they became great friends. And Kate invested into Cindy. Kate saw in Cindy someone that God had potential for, and she developed a relationship with her. And that relationship was absolutely beautiful. But it wasn't only that relationship. It was nice. We actually, the small groups met at our house, the women. And so got to know meet for the first time all of these women that were in the small group. And I think back to them, and these are women that we've raised our families together with, right? These are women that, and their husbands, that our kids grew up together. They played together. They went to Catholic school together. They went to Catholic youth group together. It was absolutely beautiful what came out of that. And they also journeyed together in relationship through the struggles and the pains and the hurts. But there was that relationship there that was just absolutely beautiful. My experience in the men's groups is I did all 4 years, and even just on short notice, I was able to find 3 of the books from when I went through. And it was really cool. We had moved from Coon Rapids, where I'd worked as a youth minister for a number of years. We had moved to Rogers after we got married and Lindsay was born. And so it was kind of my first foray into kind of getting back involved in something in the church. And it was really beautiful. Just a group of guys, again, men that became confidants, men that became, just brothers in Christ that we journeyed with. And those relationships were awesome, that we had that chance together. In December of 2004, as we were going through this, Sydney started to notice some stuff with her body that was different. And over the course of about a week and a half, we discovered that she had stage 3 breast cancer. And she had, statistically at the time, she only had about a 1 out of 3 chance of living 5 more years. Ironically, a couple days before that, we had attended a funeral for a woman who volunteered with my youth ministry at Epiphany in Coon Rapids. And she had cancer previously, gone into recovery, and the cancer had come back. And as we were visiting there with the widower, and they had 5 or 6 kids, staring at that reality that, is that going to be me someday? And, in those moments, you kind of wonder, Lord, what's going on here? And we were reading, and this is why I asked Mark, we were reading Casti Connubii that year for our small group. And for those of you that haven't studied Casti Connubii yet, it was written by Pope Pius XI in 1930. And if we ever question what a treasure our church is, the way God can work through the Holy Spirit, on a December night in 2004, Jeremy Rohr was given the question that asked this. It was this statement. It said, "We receive all of the help we need to live realistically the life that God has called us to, if we cooperate with the grace of marriage." And the question was, and of course, this is the question I got to read as we read around the table, what are some of the gifts of this sacramental and sanctifying grace? And at that moment, our Cana story was, God spoke to me through the materials. It's an amazing gift. I too often I take it for granted, but it is an amazing gift because God answered that question of what if that's me? Is that even if that happens, the sacrament of marriage provides the grace if we will but cooperate with it. Now, again, the relationships that Cindy developed with her trainer, Kate, who had by this time become a good friend, the other women in her small group helped us as Cindy navigated a tough stretch of chemo and then radiation. And at one point, there was a day that I was off working. I was in probably Long Lake or someplace a long way from Rogers. And Cindy calls me and said something like, "I'm on the way to the hospital. Mike is taking me to the hospital." Kate's husband was home that day when Cindy was over there with the girls. And they noticed that following her surgery, she was having some extreme swelling in her chest. And Cindy was like, "Well, I'll just drive in." And Mike was like, "No, you're not going to just drive in. I'm going to take you." And Mike took her in. And it is not an understatement to say that Mike probably saved her life, because she almost passed out a couple times. She passed out on the way to the hospital, so she would have been driving. I share all this to make the point that I don't know what God has in store for your story. I really honestly hope it does not involve cancer, but I know that it will be good. Following our small group experience, and that's one of the other things we did is we were invited by our priest and happily answered the call to start a group of retreats. So we would do 4 retreats a year for engaged couples at our parish. We've actually done that for 18 years now. And I was thinking beforehand, I was like, we've probably had 500 couples, engaged couples, come through on that retreat over the last 18 years. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing that I very confidently say that would not have happened if it had not been for these small groups. The fruit and the growth that we've experienced in doing that. And I think particularly for you as facilitators here, if for those of you that have been a facilitator already, you know that one of the best ways to learn this is to have to lead it. If you want to figure out how, if you want to really own information, you figure out how to teach it, right? And in that process, you really learn how to get it. And those relationships, they've continued. 2 weeks ago, as we were having a going away open house at the parish for Lindsay before she left for the convent, Kate and her husband were there helping us with the refreshments for everyone. And so again, I say all this because I hope for those of you that have been here already, you know already that Cana is more than just a small. It's more than a study. It is those things, but it has the potential to be so much more for us and for the men and women in our groups with us, if we will open ourselves up to it. Now, that being said, culturally, we're at an interesting time. I interviewed a youth minister from St. Michael for a podcast I did recently. And this youth minister, she's been a youth minister for probably 20 years. And she was saying that in 2018, they realized they had to change what they were doing in their youth ministry. And so she was out in Ohio at the time. And her and some other youth ministers were around and they were talking. They said, you know what? We talk to teens about a relationship with God. And they had to face the reality that, you know what? This generation of teenagers, they don't know how to have a relationship, right? Those of you that have older kids, you know, even ourselves, we've lost the ability as a culture to have relationships. And so I just want to say that is what is so important about what we do. Cana is more than a small group study. It's an invitation into relationship. It's an invitation to journey with other people from our parishes. It's an invitation to journey with other people from across the archdiocese. And it's an invitation to build relationships with people who we can share the joys and the sorrows of life with. And so whether you're a facilitator or a trainer, I just want to invite you to open yourself up to the potential of what those relationships could be. Now, I've made this all sound pretty nice so far, right? Those of you that have done Cana for at least a year, you also know that it's not always easy, right? There's men and women that show up to the small group that haven't done the reading, right? There's weeks that even we might think, you know what? I wish I didn't have that this week. There's weeks that you wonder, how in the world does John Paul take one sentence and write a whole paragraph? Right? Okay. These are the questions that we'll have, and this is the reality. But I can promise you this, God will meet you if you show up and you open your heart and your mind to him. Also, there'll be moments that the process may seem too difficult. I'm old enough, I still use Yahoo email. And Yahoo email did this thing in the last month where they got the fancy email. And so now AI summarizes the email. I'm like, right? It's like, there will be times that this seems too difficult. You know, how often, even myself, it's like, if it can't be said in a text or an email, but there's riches in the beauty of the documents that we read. and taking the time to reflect on the questions and taking the time to read the catechism and understand it more fully. So my invitation to you is to open yourself to maybe what God has for your story. Who knows what it will be 20 years from now? Again, I hope it's not cancer. I hope it's not any of the struggles. But I will say this, again, God gives us the grace through the sacrament if we will but cooperate with them. And that's the invitation that you have for yourself and that you get to invite your couples into. And so I hope you have a wonderful year. I look forward to journeying with the new year one guys, and enjoy the rest of the evening.